Welcome to LabMinutes.com. Now that we have Cisco Nexus 1000V installed, it's time to do basic configuration. In this video, we will be configuring some general settings, and that includes Syslog, NTP, and Snmp both version 2 and 3, and we'll be doing some basic testing as well. Here's our lab setup. On the physical topology, we have two ESXi server, ESXi 1 and 2, each with two uplinks to a upstream switch 1. And we have VSM and VM installed in layer 3 mode, and all the VMs and VSMs are sitting behind the VM. Now on the logical topology side, we have a Windows 2008 machine at the IP of .40 on VLAN 32 that we'll be using as a Syslog and Snmp servers. We also are going to be using our switch 1 as the NTP server. Okay, so let's go ahead and log into our Nexus 1000V. So here I'm going to bring up PuTTY and then SSH to the VSM. Type in username and password. So the first thing we're going to do is to look at some of the available features on the Nexus 1000V, and if you're familiar with any of the NXOS, this is pretty much the same, where you have to enable certain features for those functionalities to be available to you. And you can see here by default most of those are disabled, and some of the one that's already enabled, like HTTP server, there is enabled by default. LACP, we enable those during the installation process since we're doing LACP to the upstream switch. SSH server is also enabled by default. Okay, so just to go from top to bottom, here CTS is the Cisco TrustX, state is disabled. DHCP snooping is also another advanced features along with the Cisco TrustX is also disabled. HTTP server, like I mentioned, is enabled by default, and the reason being you need that to be enabled for you to grab the .xml extension file that you would need to use to register to the vCenter during the installation, as well as for the update manager to use the HTTP server to install the VEM. Okay, LACP was disabled, but we enable it. NetFlow, another common feature that you might need, so you have to manually enable that. Network segmentation, and this is for the VSM to work with vCloud Director, and by default it's disabled. Port profile roles, this is something that you can use to restrict certain VM administrator from seeing all the port profile, or just basically present certain group of port profile to them, so there's no need for them to see every single port profile that's been created on the VSM. Private VLAN security features to keep all the servers separated. Segmentation is just the features that you need when you configure VXLAN technology. SSH server enabled by default. TACX is disabled, but it's there and it's available for you to use to communicate, for the device admin to communicate with the, for example, ACS server. Telnet server is disabled, and this is something that you might want to keep disabled for secure access to the Nexus 1000V. vTracker is the feature that allows you as a network admin to have more visibility to the VM environment, and this is going to help you tremendously in troubleshooting. Okay, so some of these features we're going to be looking into in more detail in future videos, so make sure to look for those. Okay, so now let's start our configuration. So you can do config T, and the question mark, if you basically browse through this, you will see that the available command is not as extensive as the other Nexus product, for such as like 5K and 7K. And even comparing this to other Catalyst switches, all the features that you're used to probably not going to be available here either. But nevertheless, there are some features that basically all you need for what you need to do in the server environment, and that's the product. I'm sure the Cisco will be adding more features to the product as well. So let's start off with one of the most basic command, no IP domain lookup. So that command is still available. Okay, and then we're going to set domain. So IP domain name, and for us is LabMinutes.com. Okay, next we're going to set our clock time zone. So for us, we are in do clock question mark, and you have summertime time zone and format. So for time zone, we are in Pacific time, so PDT, PST rather, and we are -8. Make sure you specify minute as well, 0. And next we're going to set our summertime, and if you're used to the summertime in, for example, Catalyst switches, you might be used to the option of recurring. Maybe the question mark here, the option is not there. That means you have to specify exactly when's the start and finish of the daylight saving. So for us, it's Sunday, March It's actually second week first, so week number 2. Weekday is Sunday, month is March, and 2 a.m. is for the start of daylight saving, and it will ends on the first week, Sunday, November, 2 a.m. and the offset is 1 hour 60 minutes. Okay, then you can do show clock, and right now our time is way off, but we will come back and configure the NTP server in a second. Next, what we can also configure is banner, and there's pretty much only one type of banner available, which is a MOTD, or message of the day. And then we have to specify the delimiter. Again, something that you should already be familiar with. Do this and say authorize access only. And finish with the delimiter character. Okay, now that we have the banner, let's test that real quick. So I'm going to bring up another PuTTY or SSS session. Log into that. Admin, and there you go, it's our MOTD banner. Okay, so let's go all the way. We close the old session. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is the port channel load balancing algorithm that you can use. So if you do port channel load, and this is specifically when you, just like in our situation, have LACP running with the upstream switch. So if you do show port channel load balance, you can see by default is using source MAC, and if you go ahead to config T and port channel load balance into question mark Ethernet, you can see there's a lot of options that you can choose from. Okay, so you can go through the list and pick the one that's most applicable to you, or the one that you think is most effective. So for us, we're gonna do source, destination, and we do IP and port. Okay, so enter. So you can even add the VLAN as part of the option as well. Okay, next we are going to configure our Syslog server, and here in the background I already have a TFTPD64 that has built-in Syslog server running. So we're going to keep that Windows up on the back here. And the first command that we're going to do, let's take a look at the locking and then question mark. So here's some of the commands you can do. The first one you would do is console. So I do locking console, and let's say we want to do debug, which is 7. And right there, you get a little warning message that says the console speed needs to be at least 38400. By default, it's 9600. So the way to do that, if you want to do, you just want to make sure that you have enough speed in the console. So the way to do that, you can get under line console, and then there's a command for speed, and you can just set that to 38400. Okay, when that's done, you can go back and redo the locking console 7, and I can see it took it. And if you do show line, see right here, line console has changed from the 9600 to 38400 as well. Okay, next we'll go and do locking monitor. Okay, we'll do 7, and then so we're going to do locking module 7. Now we're going to point L switch to the Syslog server, so it'll be locking right here, server 172.16.32.40, and we want the locking level to be debug, and we want to make sure we have a timestamp in millisecond. You can also specify locking source interface if you like, but here you only have this option is loopback. We don't have loopback here, so we're not going to specify that. By default, it's just going to use the management interface and the VSM. Okay, now you can do exit. You can do show locking. Just to review our config here, you got locking console at debug, monitor debug, and line card at debug. Okay, so you can see we start getting some syslog messages in the background here, and this is when you do an exit from the config T, and then it said, let's just do a quick lock and said there's been configuration change in the VTY by admin. But you can see the clock or time is still off here, so the next thing we are going to do is set up our NTP server. Again, NTP question mark. You can see there's very limited command availability here. You can't even do authentication. So all you can do is set a peer server and just do basic NTP. Okay, so with NTP server, we said we're going to point it to our switch 1 that has a loopback IP of 0.117.16.0.1, and we'll make this a prefer, and make sure you specify use VRF, and we're going to be using the management VRF since it's where the management interface and the VSM is located. So got that, and then NTP source, you can also specify exact IP address do you want to use as a source of the NTP packet. And just to kind of play around with it, we're going to specify it as our management IP, which is 172.112.16. Just to show you that, IP interface brief, VRF, management. Okay, we go exit and do show NTP peer status. Just have to give it a couple seconds here before the time syncs. And you can see it already updates from what we have earlier to the correct date and time. And on the background here in the Syslog message, you can see the time has changed as well. Okay, so we are all set with Syslog and NTP. Now we're going to look at, you can see it did change to sync now. Now we're going to look at Snmp. So the program that we are going to use for our testing is called Snmp-B right here. But first, let's go ahead and configure Snmp on our switch. First thing we are going to configure is Snmp version 2, and these are the options that you can do with this Snmp server. For Snmp version 2, all you need to specify is community string, and we're going to give it Cisco, and we're just going to do read only. Okay, so enter. And let's test that real quick with version 2. So right here I already have a device added to the Snmp tools here. Just to show you, with Snmp 1 and 2, we have read community of Cisco. So actually, let me show you. There you go. And here's the IP address, which is the VSM management address. And we are allowing version 1, 2, and 3, and we configure version 3 in a second here. But just to do a quick Snmp poll, we'll select it as version 2, and you can just span the MIP tree just to find the MIP that you want. Let's do a quick system walk. Okay, we can see right here we get the switch information back from the switch. You can see that, for example, like a Nexus OS, it's a 1000V with the version and system name and some other information as well. Okay, so we know that version 2 is working. So now let's go ahead and configure version 3, and let's finish off the rest of the Snmp configuration as well. So with version 3, instead of using community, now it's a concept of user. So we're going to specify user admin, and version 3, it's also a secure communication that includes authentication as well as encryption. So for authentication, you use SHA, and for password, it has to be a complex password, so give it that. And now for privacy, which is encryption or priv, we're going to do AES128, and we're going to use the same password with the complex Cisco 123 bang. Okay, and you can enforce the global privacy as well, so let's do that with the global enforce priv. And let's finish some of the basic Snmp, such as contact. Just put LabMinutes. Location, just going to put it US. And let's do a test right now. Well, actually, no, let's go ahead and finish the configuration with the trap as well. So Snmp server, enable, trap, and then let's see what other options that we can do. So Snmp server, we did pretty much most of these. We've got location. What about source interface? So let's do source interface. for traps, you want to use our management 0. And you can see here there's also an option for inform if your Snmp server supports inform. Then management 0. And now for the trap server, Snmp trap server, we have to specify Snmp host 172.16.32.40, and we'll tell that this is going to be for traps with version 2 and community Cisco. Okay, and also what we want to do is for that one server, we want to specify the VRF that we want to use. So use VRF, put management. All right, so let's exit. And first let's test out Snmp version 3. So here on this particular tools, you can create a user. So we on the quick show run pipe include Snmp. You can see we created a specified user admin. So we create a corresponding user account with admin with the matching authentication and encryption protocols. We've got SHA and AES-128, and the Cisco, the password is complex Cisco 123 band. Okay, so that's the user. And now when it comes to configure the device, down here with this Snmp version 3, you pick the username you created and specify what kind of security you want. And in our case, it's both authentication and privacy. Okay, so now switch to Snmp version 3. Let's walk through, let's say, interface number. And actually, let's walk through this. There you go. So just from the output, we can tell that it's working. And here, for example, there's a list of all virtual Ethernet and the uplink Ethernet that's on our Nexus 1000V. And since we specify as Snmp version 3, we know it's working. So here, there's also on the top here, there's multiple tabs, and one of those is called traps. And since we have already configured our Nexus 1KV to send trap messages to our server here, you can see it so far I have received 2. So we know that is working as well. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up our video on general configuration on Cisco Nexus 1000V with Syslog, NTP, and Snmp. Thank you for watching LabMinutes.com, and I'll see you guys in the next video.